In today's episode, during listener Q&A, we'll discuss the passive refinishing method for wood floors.
And later, as part of our ongoing Young Tradesperson series, Stacy and I chat with Matt Riebs, who does a little bit of everything related to old houses.
But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
This is True Tales from Old Houses, episode 106. Hi, Daniel.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. Did you have a nice Thanksgiving?
Oh, it was great. It was relaxing. A lot of football, probably, likely. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say?
All right. Truth is, we're recording this before Thanksgiving, but let's just assume that we both had a nice Thanksgiving with no family drama. Our favorite football teams won, and we wore our fat pants. How's that?
I mean, speak for yourself. I want drama. I only want drama. Yeah, well, Brad is coming home with me this year. So he's met everyone in my family except my brother. So that'll be really fun.
Excellent.
What are your plans?
My plans are to stay home. We are split up. The family split up again this year, but we had a little fun tradition that I started with one of my sons and my daughter who are here. We did the same thing last year. We just basically pick the Thanksgiving food that we like.
Love this plan.
Yeah, then we only make that. So it's not a table full of stuff that we're like, nice. Yeah. So it's basically my daughter's probably going to eat pie and rolls, and I'm going to eat stuffing and Brussels sprouts and mashed potatoes. Yes. And then my son will eat turkey. I got one of those little turkeys in a bag. Basically, you just toss the whole thing in the oven. You can't ruin it, which is perfect for me because I don't eat meat. So,
oh, that's right. I always forget that.
Yeah. Therefore, cooking the turkey is a little beyond my wheelhouse, or a little out of my wheelhouse, I should say.
No turducken in the Grinsfelder household.
No turducken, yeah. Well, we have a great episode for today, but before we launch in, I would like to say a very hearty thank you to our Season 10 sponsors, The Craftsman Store and Sutherland Wells.
Yes, thank you. We are thankful, grateful, and honored to represent your brands. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I have a couple of housekeeping issues that I need to discuss. The first is that I just discovered that most of the automation that I set up at the beginning of the season, which includes things that go to our website, they're actually kind of broken.
Oh.
Yeah. I didn't really want to find that out right now. So it didn't affect things like the links that we've given you to buy merch or giveaways or anything like that. It just has to do with automation. So, all those times when I was like, oh, this will go right in the show notes, it did not go right in the show notes. A lot of the images haven't shown up, that kind of thing, for about the last 6 episodes. So I am taking some time to fix that. But if you wondered why you weren't seeing things on Instagram, why you weren't seeing things on Facebook or in the website, the automation was broken, and I'm sorting it all out now. So I just hope everyone can forgive the oversight there, and we'll just move forward from this point.
I personally forgive you.
Okay, well, that's good.
The internet works in mysterious ways. We're doing our best.
I keep trying to make my life easier, and instead I end up just, I don't know, it falls apart. It falls apart as far as computer-related tasks. But like you said, we're doing our best.
Was there more housekeeping?
No, that was it. I probably alluded to the fact that we had a lot of housekeeping, but that was really it. Basically, the 2 things that the website had been kind of broken because the automation was broken.
Okay. We also have a couple of announcements to share.
Yes, we do. Go for it.
This is a reminder that there is still some leftover merch from our merch run a few months ago on our website. There's a couple different types of sweatshirts, and we still have aprons. All of it is ready for immediate shipping. And if you're already shopping for the holidays, or if you just want a little something for yourself, they are beautiful products. So head to truetalesfromoldhouses.com/merch.
I have an exciting announcement because this is the season of Thanksgiving and the season of giving. Daniel and I wanted to give away a little something to our listeners. So we are offering a signed copy of the book, Cheap Old Houses, An Unconventional Guide to Loving and Restoring a Forgotten Home by Elizabeth and Ethan Finkelstein.
So exciting. For Refresh, my house is in that book, along with many, many other old home lovers that you probably follow on Instagram if you're on Instagram. And it's a really good read. It's very well written. I really enjoyed it.
The photography is beautiful. And if you would like to enter the giveaway between now and December 18th, please go to truetales.from oldhouses.com/giveaway.
And lastly, our regular announcement we like to make, please take the time to subscribe and leave a rating or review of this podcast if you, in fact, like this podcast that you've intentionally played and are listening to right now. We sure appreciate it.
We do. We actually got a new review, and I want to say thank you for that. Could I read it? I want to read it.
Yeah. Let's navel gaze just a little bit.
The newest review says, I have been listening for a few years now and have gained so much knowledge in that time. This podcast pulls from so many great resources and makes things more accessible. Daniel is such a great addition along with the minisodes. I look forward to every new episode.
Oh, how
so
kind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought that was nice, and I wanted to read it too because I didn't think you had seen it yet, Daniel, and it mentions you by name.
I'm always afraid people are saying bad things about me, so I just don't look at I've never looked at the reviews. But maybe someday I'll get it for myself.
You have nothing to fear, Daniel.
I like to just let you monitor the situation and tell me the highlights.
So we already talked about what we did during Thanksgiving, but this isn't an announcement. This is a follow-up on last week's Mama-sode with your mom. I talked about going to or being unwittingly seated at the third act of an opera that I could not understand at all. I talked about that last week on the episode with your mom, Ricky. I always hesitate to say things like that about art because then I feel guilty. As soon as I say something about it, I feel really guilty because I know art is subjective and art is meant to make you feel something. In this case, I felt incredibly confused, but I guess that is a feeling as well.
Highly dramatic German opera that you were not expecting to be at. I think that's a reasonable way to feel.
And to be clear, the third act. So coming in on the third act of this. Yes. All right. But I got this message through our contact form from Candy, and I am so happy that she wrote in. First of all, she named the opera. She must know a thing or two about opera, whereas I know absolutely nothing about it. So she knew the opera. It was the third act of Alban Berg's Wozzeck. And that's how you say that in German. In English, it's spelled Wozzeck, but it's Wozzeck. And Alban Berg is an Austrian composer. And she cleared up a little something for me. Why it wasn't really making sense in a lot of ways to my ears is that it's actually an atonal opera. So that means it's not really written in any particular key, nor does it come back to a specific key. So, when your ears are always listening for patterns and such, there are no real patterns there. And that makes it a little bit more confusing. Candy also clarified that it's a very important work in early 20th century music. And one fun fact is that it was banned as degenerate art by Hitler. So my thought is, if Hitler hated it, then Wozzeck has my respect.
I love that. And I am really impressed that based on your wonderful but confused description that she was able to identify the actual show. Was it the stick horse that gave it away? How did you do that? I love it.
I honestly think that is the most impressive thing as well. So, Candy, I really just wanted to say thank you in public for reaching out with the information. I'm still a little lost on how the whole story plays out, but I did learn something about the importance of this piece, and I really appreciate that opportunity.
I mean, once again, we really do have the best listeners.
Don't we? We absolutely do. Time for listener Q&A, and today's topic actually comes from Angela. She sent us a message through the contact form. Thank you, Angela. She brought to my attention the Rosebud Company, which is a passive floor refinishing company out of Atlanta. And they travel all over the country restoring floors that way in historic buildings. One of their more recent projects is the Ford House in Detroit. And Bob Yap, he's been a guest here before. He also teaches workshops on passive restoration at the Belvedere School in Missouri. But I actually have a decent amount of knowledge about this topic, so I think we're going to tackle it on our own today. Are you up for that, Daniel?
I am, and grateful because I don't really know much at all about this, but tell us about passive floor restoration. It sounds very peaceful.
It is very peaceful, yeah. But let's talk about what it is for one. So passive restoration is where you remove the polyurethane finish or paint chemically instead of sanding it off. So basically, you're going to use a stripper to take all that off and scrape it off instead of using a big drum sander or an edger or anything like that. And the reason why you might want to do that is because maybe your floor has been refinished so many times that there's really not enough tongue and groove left. And we talked about that in a past episode. So that would be one reason why passive restoration would be the best option. It's really good for inlaid floors. And you talked about that last time too, about how the wood on inlaid floors is often very thin and it just can't hold up to being sanded again and again over time. Another good reason to choose passive floor restoration over sanding is that if your floor is painted, it's probably lead paint. And if you sand, then even with really good equipment, there is a chance that lead dust is going to make its way around. And if you use a gel type stripper, then all of those lead particulates would be contained in that, and therefore lead dust wouldn't be an issue. Passive floor restoration is also really great for small areas. I have this little step in my living room, and it's probably 16 inches wide, but 8 feet long, and it has a rounded over edge. It'd be really hard to get a sander there. I'd have to do it by hand, and it would take a really long time to grind that off of there. And sanders don't work really well for rounded edges. So that would be a good candidate for passive restoration, or just a little small room or something like that.
Very cool. So my floors, now I'm all curious, my floors, much of the polyurethane is gone and has been gone. And so my feeling is they really do need to be sanded because we just need to erase all of this staining and, they're kind of gross. Do you think that passive restoration would work for something like that, or it's more just to remove old coatings?
It's best to just remove old coatings. Chemical strippers don't penetrate stain and take stain out. That does take some sanding. It's almost like restoring a floor the way you would do a piece of furniture. So if you had a table or something and you would be putting some stripper on that. So when I say stripper, usually the best options for that are the more natural things like Smart Strip or Citrus Strip or Blue Bear, used to be called soy gel, if anybody's familiar with that.
I used soy gel once. It was awesome.
Yeah, it took me forever to figure out that soy gel and Blue Bear were the same thing.
I thought soy gel just disappeared. That's so exciting to know.
Blue Bear, look it up. You'll find it.
Great.
So after you put your nice thick layer on the floor, then you would cover it. I would cover it in plastic and let that stripper do its magic and then just scrape off the finish the same way that you would do if you were refinishing a piece of furniture. I always like to use a pull scraper for my little T-Rex arms. I feel like those just work much better for me. And then probably one of the most important steps would be if you need to neutralize.
Sometimes I get into dangerous territory where I try to be a scientist, but I believe the basic principle is that some strippers work on alkalinity and some work on acidity. And so you just kind of have to know what's what. So Citrus Strip, as the name implied, citrus is acidic. So you would neutralize it with something more alkaline.
Yeah, that's the general idea of neutralizer. And every single stripper will tell you on the package directions whether it needs to be neutralized. And the important part is that you don't skip that step. If it says it needs to be neutralized, absolutely. But always check the package directions to see if it needs neutralizer, because sometimes formulas change or products change, company hands and things. So don't take my word for it. Always double check and see if your stripper needs to be neutralized. after you've done that neutralization, then you just do a light sand and then stain and top coat with the product of your choice.
If you're very nervous about it, you can usually reach out to the manufacturer and they can tell you pretty quickly. But there's so many strippers on the market that we probably shouldn't give like blanket advice anyway. So
I also want to say that the Rosebud company that Angela mentioned, they have a whole YouTube series about their method. And so I'm going to link that in the show notes. That's another really good way to get some information if you want to do it as a DIY. Now, if you don't want to do passive restoration on your floors as a DIY, there are still some companies that will do it, but you need to ask for it by name. And just make sure that you and the company are talking about the same thing. You're on the same page.
now can I ask a unpleasant question?
Perhaps.
It sounds expensive. Is it very expensive?
I do not have the cost, but I would assume that it would be quite expensive to passively restore a floor, especially when I think of a couple of things. First, they're using that method in things like house museums or big mansions
where they have grants and things to pay for it.
Yes. So I would assume that it is more expensive than just grinding off the top coat with a drum sander. But as a DIYer, it could be quite cost effective, I think. And, your time, you put your time into it, it is going to be messy, but I'd do it.
Yeah, because certainly buying a drum sander, very expensive, but even renting is expensive. And the thing you don't realize when you look at the price to rent a drum sander is that you then also have to buy all the sandpaper. And the sandpaper is really not cheap at all. So it ends up being fairly costly to do all of that. Obviously, much cheaper than hiring a professional, and those things are heavy.
Oh, so heavy.
My friend John, who has a 1723 stone house, and it has these big, wide pine boards, and they're beautiful. He feels very strongly that thou shalt never take a sander to those floors. So he hand scraped, I think without any stripper, just a scraper and a mask and a lot of time, hand scraped his floors. And they do look absolutely gorgeous. I have to say, I don't really mind when old pine floors get sanded. I think they look good, but it was an interesting perspective, I would say.
Sure. And then going back to the reasons why, of course, it would be, this would be a great method if you cannot sand anymore. If there's just not enough to sand. But yeah, I think there are many people who feel that hand scraping is the way to go, for sure.
Yeah, I think for him, it's more of like an aesthetic thing too, of just, I don't want my floors to look like someone took a drum sander to them because this house is in just 1723. It would just be too flat or too perfect. I think that's his issue.
I get that.
But I'm not sure I could scrape a whole house. I think I'd lose my mind.
Yeah, it would be really hard. All right. Well, I just want to say thanks to Angela again for bringing that topic to our attention. I hope I covered it at least in a cursory way that all of you who are considering it can do a little bit more research on your own, maybe find a company who can do that sort of thing. But do check out that YouTube series from the Rosebud Company. And I believe it's rosebudfloors.com. It is definitely going to be in the show notes. The automation is fixed. It will be there.
I did spend some time on their website. The before and afters are gorgeous. So
impressive, aren't they?
They do a beautiful job. Yes.
All right. Well, let's take another little break. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Angela.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by The Craftsman Store, another excellent resource from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog. The Craftsman Store is your go-to place for old house tools and supplies.
Once again, our old buddy, old pal Scott has taken the hassle out of tracking down all the specialized old house supplies that we need and put them all in one place for us. There you will find a cozy little online hardware store full of books, tools, and replacement parts.
And it is holiday season, so be sure and check the Craftsman Store for a special gift for yourself or someone that you care about. Scott runs a top-notch small business. The customer service is an actual human, and they do ship fast.
From window restoration to plaster repair and much, much more, they have everything you need to do the job like a pro. So check it out today at thecraftsmanstore.com and save 10% on your orders if you use the code TrueTales.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
We love to tell you, unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood, so it flexes and contracts as conditions change, which makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
I'm currently using Murdoch's on my unpainted wainscoting in the bathroom. That project continues, and the wood is looking so nice, so warm, so rich. I'm really, really happy with it. Sutherland Wells also has an entire product line for whatever you're working on now, not necessarily your bathroom. It might be siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it.
And we've mentioned before, but they smell so good. So to learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells. That's WELLES, sutherlandwells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TRUETALES. Our guest today is Matthew Riebs.
Matthew's path to the trade started very early, and a chance to meet his HGTV idol as a teen further set him on his current path.
Well, my name is Matthew Riebs. I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I just restore. There's really no title for what I do. I kind of touch this, that, and everything.
Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the podcast.
Matthew, you and I have a Fort Wayne connection. I had really hoped that I'd be able to be in Fort Wayne today and interview you in person, but it just didn't work out.
Well, that's okay. Maybe another time you can see it when my exterior is actually done.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I would absolutely love to do that. So you're on the show today, Matthew, as part of our Young Tradesperson series. And so I'm really excited to get to know you better. We've had lots of conversations with people who have joined the trades later in life or after several careers. And so we were looking specifically for people that we could talk to who have chosen to go into the trades fairly early in their career life or age-wise or everything. So we look forward to learning more about you.
Speaking of the exterior of your house, I've creeped a little on Instagram. Beautiful house. Tell us what you're working on.
I pretty much abandoned the exterior for the year, even though the weather has been gorgeous. I just was mentally prepared to stop and get working inside, and the last 2 weekends I haven't accomplished anything. But I do work full-time for a property management group. So we deal with old houses that have been subdivided into multiple units.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through, we update them, make them pretty again, more suitable for modern living, which sometimes you have to make some choices and sacrifices, and I don't always love it, but overall, we keep the character of the house alive and do our best to make the spaces functional and still, you're still in an old building. So I do that all the week long for 40 hours, and then I have my house, and I do side work. I'm preparing to refinish a staircase coming next month, so that'll be fun. I'm going to make a little money. I've got some windows I've been working on for somebody just throughout the year as I have extra time. I actually have to build her a storm window, which will be an excursion further into carpentry for me. So that'll be a learning experience that I'm looking forward to, but also nervous. A better time to learn.
One of our sponsors, Scott Seidler, has a wonderful downloadable instructional about building storm windows. I believe with removable bottom pane so you can put in a screen in the summer, which I will be closely reading as I approach that project for myself.
I know that the ones with the screen built in and the glass removable, that's what I want to do for my house. But this one that I'm building for my client is just over a fixed window, so it can just be a regular old one. But yeah, I want to make those at least for the front of my house, just because I have aluminum and they're fine, but they're incomplete and they're missing parts, and nobody makes those parts anymore.
Same boat over here. I got the triple tracks. At some point, I just threw away all the screens because they were so ugly, and then I've had to take them out, take the storms out for various things, and I have a whole stack that I cannot figure out what window they go back in. Of course, I didn't label them or anything because I'm like, oh, I'll figure it out.
I think a lot of us have a stack like that. Actually, I have a funny story about triple tracks. So I live in town and lots of old houses, and I ended up having to help somebody get their sash unstuck. So when I went into, they said, in this room, we have aluminum storm windows and we can get the sash up and down, but we don't know how to get any airflow. They didn't realize that the triple tracks had 3 different parts. So they had lived there for 20 years and never knew that you could put the solid pane of glass up during the summer and pull the screens down. So that's how you got airflow in the summer. They had no idea that's how they functioned. I blew their minds when I told them that. I was like, look, this is what you can do. You can get the sash open and this is how your triple tracks work. You can even take them out. I showed them and they were like, oh, you're a wizard. They thought I was a wizard. Like, what have you done?
You are a wizard.
I'm a window wizard, right?
I've always said this.
Oh, what a great business name, the Window Wizard.
Oh, take it. Write it down. It's yours.
This is being recorded. You've given away your copyright.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know. If I don't copyright it first and become the window wizard. Yeah.
You heard it here, folks.
So I want to know, how did you get into the trades? Like, what was the deciding factor for you going into the trades, or did you try some other things first? And how did the trades work better for you? I know that's a big, long question, but let's take it apart.
Oh boy. I mean, maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. I mean...
Let me give you the questions separated out. So when did you start in the trades?
Well, I started working after high school pretty much immediately.
Doing what?
Same suit, basically. I was working for a different property management group, so it's still the same idea. The old houses subdivided into the apartments, but just a different group that was a little bigger and just had different standards, different ideas. And I worked there for 4 years and then moved on to the company I'm with now in 2018. But I was always curious about, I grew up in old houses and I would always just sit there and watch my dad work. My mom has pictures of me watching him hang drywall with my hands behind my back, just watching him. And I just was always interested in it. It just came with me. I don't know. It came with my software,
I get it. I do.
By the time I was 14, I was stripping the hardware in my room and I took my window out and redid it. I redid my dad's garage windows 3 times, actually, because as I was learning to glaze, I had to keep developing my technique. And
Sure.
I was going to workshops in town that the local historic society was doing and building connections. And I just kept rolling with it. And then that was how I found my first and my current boss, actually, both of them through that exposure. And also, one of the more interesting parts of my story, how I got some pretty huge exposure at one point in time. I'm sure many people in the old house community have heard of the show Rehab Addict.
Sure. Yeah. Tell us more.
Oh, yes. Nicole.
Yeah, Nicole Curtis. So this goes back to the whole I was always interested in it thing. I would sit down with my parents and watch house flipping shows with them. And I'm like 10 years old watching Flip This House. It's ridiculous. I should have been watching SpongeBob, but there I was watching HGTV. And I actually wanted to be a chef at the time. I went through a lot of different professions I thought about. I thought about being a teacher. I thought about being a pastor. I thought about being a chef. I thought about a lot of things because I never knew really, I didn't understand yet that this was going to click and I was going to find my place in the world. So I just kind of had some different ideas. And my friend at the time, we were 8th graders planning to open a restaurant someday. I'm so glad that didn't happen. So I was home alone one night and I made some food and I went downstairs and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to turn on and see what's on HGTV. And it was Rehab Addict. And this was in 2010 when she had just started. She had 4 episodes. It was a brand new show. It didn't really have a following. But I liked what I saw. And that was the first time I saw a show about someone being like, let's save these windows. Let's refinish this woodwork. And it was like actual old house preservation. So I went to her Facebook page and started following her and posting stuff. And I was sharing like, look, I'm stripping my hardware. And she just took notice to me as this, how old would I have been? 13 or 14-year-old kid.
Oh.
Talking about restoration. And it was easy for her to notice me because she had such a small fan base at the time. So we connected through that, and I met her in person 2 years later. I gave her a box of light fixtures.
Oh, wait, explain these light fixtures, like just from a house that you were working on, or you just found them and thought she might like them?
They were from my parents' first house that they brought with them to their second house. And I found them in the attic and I polished them up and cleaned them, and they weren't going to do anything with them. So we brought them with us. She was at a home show in Indy and we met her there. And we've kept in some kind of touch, I mean, she's just an incredibly busy person. So
She talks about it on Instagram sometimes. It's like she never stops moving. It's
Never.
like, wow. That's really funny. Around the same time, I found her show pretty early on and was immediately in love with her and what she was doing. And we corresponded once on Twitter. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was so starstruck. And one time I made a GIF of back in the days when there weren't that many GIFs around. I really wanted a GIF of that part that at least used to be in the intro of the show where she pulls something off and why would you cover that up? And I made a GIF of it and she like tweeted it or did something with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, she knows me. Let's get her on the show. Put in a good word for us.
I went a little bit farther than just a retweet.
You really did.
When I was, oh God, what year was it? 2014, which is already ancient history, and I can't process that. She did a project with LeBron James in Ohio.
I remember that project.
And invited me to go work on some windows with her. So I went there and I appeared on the show.
Did you?
I'm just this little,
That's so cool.
18 years old, fresh out of Lutheran high school, and that was a much different project than what she usually does because of the whole thing with LeBron James. There was a lot more people, a lot more security. It was a lot to take in. I went back to one of her projects a few years after that, and it was much more low key and like just one camera person. And I made a Home Depot run for her to buy some lumber, and like it was just chilling. We hung out and planted some flowers and went out for a beer afterwards. And like
when you were not 18, when you were 21, right?
Yes, that was down the road. Yes, I should clarify. No underage drinking happened.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, but I am a mom and I want Nicole to stay out of trouble as well. And so I want to make it clear that you had that drink at age 21. I understood what you said. We just missed a little sentence in there. So that's great. So in the meantime, have you had the chance to work with her again or meet in person with her again?
I haven't had the chance to work with her, but I went 2 years ago. She had an open house at one of her new projects that she invited me down, and me and my husband both went, and we just kind of helped work the crowds, and she introduced us in front of everybody. We actually got mistaken for a different couple that has an HGTV show. I can't think of the name of their show right now.
Oh, that's funny.
But there were a few different people who were like, aren't you the two? And we're like, no. And they were just like, oh, okay. Oh, you're just trying to be low key. We're like, no, we're not. We're not those two people.
That's funny. So it sounds like Nicole was a pretty big influence for you and got you started on a path that you've continued on.
Absolutely. I mean, I learned about dumpster picking from her and was never the same after that. When I got my first car, it was all over and I was stuffing stuff in the trunk and storing it in my dad's attic, and oh my gosh. And now I have my own basement and my own garage. My attic's not usable, and I am always having to rearrange to find more space for the stuff I take.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. Pro tip about dumpster diving, just for anyone listening, set those car keys down outside the dumpster before you climb in it. Learned that the hard way.
Did you have to go back in the dumpster and look for your keys?
Oh, I once spent 2 hours, and I don't have like an AirTag because I can't be responsible like that. And so I figured they were in the dumpster, but I wasn't even sure if they were in the dumpster. And then I literally spent 2 hours moving everything from one side of the dumpster to the other side of the dumpster. And they were like at the bottom. Like I did finally find them, but oh my gosh, I was so panicked. Anyway,
oh gosh.
Quick aside about dumpsters.
Good tip.
So can I ask, obviously somebody with your kind of ethos around restoring and reusing and all of that, I feel like I sort of understand as now a property owner of a apartment building, like, you know, you do have to make decisions that maybe you wouldn't want to make in your own house. Can you talk a little about how that works for you? And yeah, there's no question, just sort of a prompt.
I don't want to say that I wasn't aware that things are expensive and you have to budget, but the thing about working for other people, you just don't understand quite as much as when it is your money on the line. And I really learned that hardcore this year. I took out a home equity line of credit for my house for about $43,000. And I said, I'm going to use half of it on my house and I'll use the other half to invest. And my house ate it.
Right.
I have a few thousand of it left. And HVAC was $9,000, a roof was $12,000. I don't even remember how much money I spent on lumber because I'm who I am, and I had to replace my soffits and fascia boards with tongue and groove and have it be everything authentic and the way it was when it was built. That cost all kinds of money. But that was a decision that I wanted to make for the house, just like stripping the paint and going to linseed oil paint. I was willing to put myself through it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bit of regret.
Don't we all?
Because if I had just gone with a traditional regular paint system, I would have been done.
Yeah, can you talk about, I don't think I've ever talked to somebody who used linseed paint to paint a house. I've heard it for windows and, smaller stuff, but I'm very curious. How did that go? How does it perform?
It seems to be doing well. I mean, the paint does go a long way. So it's a little more expensive up front to buy, but the paint has good spreadability. I did find it spread really nice on all my brand new lumber. And when I took it to my dried out old siding, it was soaking it up like a sponge.
Mm-hmm.
But I also used the Paint Shaver Pro to get the paint off, which left it kind of rough. And I was rushing just to get enough sections done so I can have downspouts put on. So I did a light sand to get it nicer, but it really needs to be brought up through the grit system to get it smooth. And I think if it were smoother, it wouldn't soak up as much paint.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense because the grain would be closed.
Yeah. I guess the thing that led me to that decision was just hoping that it stays that way. We're not going to live here forever.
You say that, Matthew. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. I think all of us who are like, oh, we'll only be here a short time, suddenly here we are with our mortgages and high interest rates, and it's really hard to let that go and move into something else. But I really was just giving you a hard time, Matthew.
So, sorry if you said that. How long have you owned this house?
I bought it in 2020, just before everything went down. When I closed, nobody was in face masks. There was no plexiglass, and it was, we were living in a duplex at the time that we tried to buy, and the owner just wanted too much money for it.
Mm-hmm.
And all said, I'm glad that didn't happen because I would have been a new landlord in COVID, and that just would have been a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this house. It doesn't make me any money like an income property would have, but it's been a great place to call home.
I'm sorry to ask, how old are you, our young tradesperson?
I am 28.
28, married, house.
You've got it all together, Matthew.
You've really got it together. Full-time employment.
I wish. It sure doesn't feel that way.
Do we call you a millennial or a Gen Z? I can't remember where the cutoff is.
I think I fall under millennial. I'm like in the tail end of it. Sometimes it depends on who you ask.
We're happy to have you. I want him on our team. He's got it together. He makes us look good.
I just wanted to say, as someone, you just said, Matthew said, oh gosh, I don't feel like I have it all together. I just want you to know that nobody really does feel that way. Like, I'm considerably older than both of you. And it's just a matter of stay in the course. Just keep going. Life doesn't look like we thought it would, for sure. It just ends up being what it is. So that's my profound thought as someone who is not a millennial. I'm Gen X. Everybody forgets about us.
Auntie Stacy's got something to say.
Yes, exactly. So, Matthew, I want to go back to when you said, you thought about being a chef and you thought about being, I don't remember what your other ideas were, but you had some ideas.
Pastor.
Oh, a pastor. That one's intriguing. But anyway, I would like to know, you thought of all these things, you graduated from high school. Did you find yourself kind of thinking, oh gosh, now I don't know what I want to do? Or did you, from that point, decide, I think the trades is the place for me?
Oh, I absolutely was just not certain what the path forward was. Even though I had the obvious right in front of my face, you're just expected to go to college and get a degree in something. And that's what I thought I had to do. But I wasn't the best student in the world. It's not that I misbehaved. It's just that I was lazy and I didn't appreciate the education I was getting. And as such, colleges, it would have been a challenge.
I'm sorry. When you say it would have been a challenge, do you think it would have been hard for you to get in, or it would have been hard for you to complete the coursework once you were there?
Oh God, both.
Okay.
I mean, my guidance counselor told me I'd be lucky if I got into like some of the local colleges. And classrooms are not really where I like to, they say the school of hard knocks, the school of life. That's for me. I have to learn things through experience. I wish I could be someone who someone says, instructions, you got it? Yeah. No. I have to take the words and like put them in a pot full of seasonings and cook them gently on simmer and then put them in the broiler and then, put it together as a recipe on my own. I can't just hear something and get it. And that's just, a classroom doesn't work for me. I have to do something. And I feel like I totally derailed from the question at hand.
No, it's great. Keep going.
I was like, what the heck am I going to do? I actually even thought about, I've always loved to clean.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always good at it. I was a good little boy. I never had to be asked to clean my room. I always did it every Saturday, pretty much. So I thought about getting into cleaning.
I need one of you. Yeah. So cleaning, did you think maybe offices or homes or both or?
Yeah, I did. I was like, maybe I could just start a cleaning business or go, I don't know, just work for, there was a company that does like fire and water restoration. I looked at that. I just didn't feel like I fit in any of them. And so going back to those connections I made when I was a teenager, one of those people reached out to me and said, I really need someone like you in my back pocket on my crew. I've got all these houses that we need to work on. So I was like, oh, absolutely. Of course. That sounds perfect. And it just kind of came to me, and I never exactly wanted to be in rentals, and I still don't per se, but it's been a good place for me over the last 10 years already. I can't believe it, to get into old houses with other people's money, and
sure,
I can just touch them and learn about them and see how they work. And you get basic maintenance, and I've become an expert painter. I'm trying to get better at carpentry. I've learned about restoring windows and floors and plaster walls. And I've taken that farther, just not at the work experience, but going home and getting books and going to blogs. And the Instagram community is just the most amazing thing that's come out of the internet. And even though I haven't really participated in it that much, I have been with it. I mean, I joined Instagram in like 2012 before there really was an old house community to say. And I've just watched it grow and come up. And I need to get off my butt and really put myself out there and share more content, because it needs to be out there. I kind of would put myself on a back burner and be like, well, there's enough people out there talking about windows and doors and floors. And I'm like, I had to stop myself and be like, absolutely not. There could never be enough people out there talking about restoration labor.
Exactly. This is a great first step. You come on the show, everybody gets to know a little bit more about you. And if they wanted to follow you on Instagram, what is your Instagram handle, which we will also put in the show notes?
Well, it is at Matt Riebs, which is, the most thoughtful, creative name that was ever made. It's just my name.
Right. And Reibs, by the way, is Reibs.
Part of me wants a new page that's fresh and it's more professional, and I haven't followed like all kinds of weird accounts, and like it's a cleaner page, a more professional page, a fresh slate to start sharing some of these things and give myself more of a business model instead of just my personal Instagram that I've had since high school.
Mm-hmm.
High school.
I know.
I love this series, but I hate this series because I've never felt so old in my life than interviewing our young tradespeople.
I was the one who couldn't figure out how to set up these earbud things.
That's true.
Even I knew that.
He started off boomer, he ended Gen Z, he's going in reverse. We don't understand. Can I ask, you mentioned maybe starting a business next year. What would it be, property management or something else there?
I envision something that I want to be accessible to homeowners and do the stuff that I already do people's windows, restore their staircases, refinishing things, and just like the pretty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to keep it somehow accessible, because there's like this natural path that restoration businesses follow where they start out with low dollar projects, but then the business grows and they need big dollar projects to pay for having the business. And you kind of lose the connection between the average people and wealthier people. And wealthier people's old homes will always find the care they need. But the rest of us
Right.
will always be seeking that help and that knowledge. And it's not a path that will make me rich. I understand it and I accept it, but I want to be accessible to the average person and pass knowledge along, and maybe be like, show you, okay, I'll refinish your staircase for you and let me show you everything I'm doing so your staircase is done. And that's a big thing off the list. But if you want to refinish your trim or your woodwork, you have now seen me do it. I've got your tools, I've got your supplies, and they can take on the rest of it themselves with more confidence. And if they have a problem, they can call me, I guess. And then I would like to believe that that helps people continue to see that these are all things anyone can do. I never know what to call myself, because all the things I specialize in, a lot of it is just what 100 years ago homeowners did, is maintenance. But it's all been lost to the maintenance-free replacement industry. So now all of a sudden I can make a job out of it.
I think you're onto something there, Matthew.
I sure hope so.
As a young tradesperson, or let me start this over. Okay. So as you followed along in your career path that you've set out for yourself, what's maybe one thing that you're just really proud of, something that happened that you were a part of that has kind of also made you who you are now?
Oh, yes. In my senior year of high school, the city was starting to change. The downtown was starting to grow, and there was a development proposal that involved knocking down. There was a very unique building that kind of had like this, it had a double front porch, and it was this brick storefront, and there was no other architecture like it around. And I saw it, I was walking around, and I just fell in love with it, and it was right in the path of that project. So I started a movement to save it. I wanted it relocated so they could continue with the project, because half of it was a surface parking lot.
Okay.
So I didn't want to stop the project. I just wanted to save this one particular building, move it to a vacant site somewhere. And I created a Facebook page, and it got about 3,000 followers, and I was on the news, and it got a lot of attention, but I still lost, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad.
It just came down to, at the end of the day, I needed to have money. If I wanted to move it, where's your money? And I was a senior in high school. I didn't have that. Yeah.
Right.
It's a lot of lemonade stands.
So do you feel like that motivated you? Were you just so sad you thought, I don't really want to do this anymore? Or did you feel more in tune with your community and ready to create positive change?
I definitely built a lot more connections with the community during that time. And the unfortunate thing is that the momentum has kind of almost disappeared, mostly just because the people who I was connected with back then had been at it since the 70s and 80s. And by now, they're done with it. It's time to slow down and retire. And a lot of those people aren't out there working and fighting anymore. And then, COVID came around, and I just wasn't out there. So I kind of lost that momentum a little bit, but I want to figure out how to get that back. And it needs to come back, because as always happens in a city that starts to grow, there's always going to be neighborhoods in the way of that growth. And someone has to be out there, because there's been other historic sites that have been leveled in the past couple of years that nobody said anything. There wasn't even a news article about, let's talk about the history of this building. We're so sad we're losing it, but at least acknowledge that it's happening.
Right.
So I need to grab that and just get back. But, it's harder as a working adult
Sure.
than it is as a senior in high school, because it takes energy and time, and, I have bills to pay.
Right. And finding a group of people who are in your age range who also have the same difficulties and challenges that you have just going day to day is even harder. And it really does take a movement. Like you said, those people who were working since the 70s and 80s, they've aged out. They're doing something different. And without a core group coming up, then it does make it a big challenge. And if we don't tell communities, our communities, what we want, we will just get what the city planner gives us, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what that plan will be.
I think what's so fun, though, about like the world of preservation and the people involved in it is they're so passionate and they are so excited when young people express any kind of interest whatsoever. So yeah, I think while it is true that the population is aging, I think it's also true that people my age or Matthew's age are looking at old buildings kind of in a new way of, this is the only path to home ownership I'm likely to have, or this is something worth appreciating. And I'm very encouraged by that. So I think part of your potential new Instagram page should be maybe bringing attention to endangered buildings in your area. Yeah. So there's a podcast from Salt Lake City called Demolish Salt Lake. And she talks about, endangered buildings in her community. Like, I think a lot of places just don't have kind of a centralized way to advocate for those buildings. I feel like Kingston doesn't really have that. Luckily, we don't see a ton of demolition, but
Fort Wayne has great opportunities for mixed use spaces too. So they could really do a lot there with their downtown for sure.
Get yourself on the planning board too. For real, it's really not that hard to get a little politically involved. And it's like, once you get your foot in the door, like, I think being on the planning board for young preservationists is like a really impactful thing, because a lot of places have fairly preservation-friendly city codes that they repeatedly break in favor of developers who don't want to follow those codes. So, you can really be a
voice.
I was going to say, but that's not for the podcast. Sometimes I can't think of something.
I'll be over here stirring the pot on my new to me 1976 copper tone magic chef. Thank you.
There you go.
That's great. Well, before we wrap today, I just have one more question for you. Just a real quick one. Do you have any regrets about going into the trades right out of high school?
At this point, no. I don't believe I ever could have functioned in an office setting or anything like that. The only thing I regret is sometimes I wish that, and this would have changed the course of my life completely, but I think a lot about, like, there seems to be a lot more alive and well tradespeople in schooling on the East Coast area. I mean, that's where This Old House lives out of, and like, there's just more of it there. And I kind of wish I could have been like, I'm just going to go out there, get an apprenticeship or something and learn like fine restoration or woodworking. But I've been sticking it out here and just kind of doing it on my own and learning what I can. And I just have to trust that this is the right path that the world needs me on. And also have to trust that this part of the Midwest needs me, because like I said, we have a lot of contractors here, and that's all well and good. But as far as people who understand how old houses work, we just don't have that. It's all been lost. So I think I'm in the place where I'm supposed to be and where I belong. And the choices I made were right. I don't have money, but who in the old house community does? And that's just because we care too much. And, we're more than willing to put the money into the place to get it right.
And if you're out there listening and you're an old homeowner who somehow still has money, we'll take some.
Yeah. If you want to see more cool stuff happen.
I think that's a lovely place to stop for today. And Matthew, it's been so great having you here. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I kind of was going all over the place, but my train of thought is that I don't have a train. It's a bus that's lost, I think.
If Stacy can make me sound intelligible on this podcast, you will be just fine.
Thanks again, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses, and thank you to our guest today, Matthew Riebs.
Don't forget to head to our website to enter the giveaway for the Cheap Old Houses book and take a peek at our leftover available merch. Also, please consider leaving a rating or review wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts.
To continue the conversation, join us on Facebook and Instagram at True Tales from Old Houses, and you can follow me at Blake Hill House or Daniel at Daniel Cantor.
Ideally both. And to learn more about everything we discussed in today's episode or request a transcript, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Until next time.
See you next week.